After a decade of silence, the buzz is back. Here's your look at the brand new Trick or Treat Studios, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 Leatherface 1/6 scale figure. Trick or Treat Studios is proud to present the officially licensed Leatherface 1/6 scale figure from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. The figure stands roughly 13 inches tall and includes 4 hands plus a highly detailed chainsaw accessory. No secret, it's the meat. You don't skimp on the meat. And as we have been seeing from Trick or Treat Studios, when it comes to their 6-scale releases, they don't skimp at all on the details. I'd like to thank the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios that did provide this sample of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 Leatherface that we could have a look at in this review. Good news, though, is this guy is currently in stock over on their site for $199.99 if you'd like to add this one to your Texas Chainsaw Massacre collection. If you did also think that this guy was only going to be 12 inches, he's actually clocking a lot higher than that. In fact, this version of Leatherface is 12.5 inches in height, or is about 31.5 centimeters tall. To show you what he also looks like with other Texas Chainsaw Massacre figures, I'm bringing in 2 figures that Sideshow Collectibles has released, more so just to show you guys the size differences. On the one side, we had the Slaughter Mask from the 1974 film. On the other side, of course, we got the Pretty Woman. Both of them are actually a lot shorter than the one we get here from Trick or Treat Studios. They're also considerably lighter as well. Dog will hunt, and to help assist Leatherface on his hunt, he needs the proper tools of the trade. He trades in his original yellowish-green chainsaw he wields in the 74 film, this time in favor of a red chainsaw, with a much longer, nastier pair of teeth. The teeth, yes, you can see, have been quite busy recently. Not only quite a helping of blood there on both sides of the chainsaw's blades, but also by the fact it looks a little wet, it looks like the wounds are still fresh. Now, while he's been cutting through something or someone, likelihood that the blood is going to be splattering up, right? I mean, there's no blood anywhere on the front of his suit, unless he has a really expensive dry cleaning bill. But you would think, though, the blood's going to end up in other places, too. Trick or Treat also thought of that, because there's quite a lot of shiny blood all across the front of his motor. There's also blood at the back of the handle there as well. And while the functioning pull cord doesn't actually get the engines revving, it's a nice recreation of the chainsaw he wields in the second film. Now, he's not going to be wielding much of a chainsaw if he doesn't have the proper hands to do it. Luckily, though, they did include 2 pairs of interchangeable hands. Ironically, though, all the hands that he has are all belonging on this side of the figure's body. As he starts out of the packaging with a closed fist, I've already done away with removing that from the forearm, he does also come with a gripping hand. Now, he has already, one thing I've already changed, is he does have a trigger hand, suitable for holding, of course, the trigger on the end of the chainsaw. If you don't like that and would rather have him just gripping the handle instead, he has then this hand. The hands themselves, plastic-wise, are pretty soft, but still I had to kind of pry them away from the palm to get them around the handle. If you're having a similar sort of situation, obviously you can just heat that up in hot water. But the hands do an okay job of fitting around the handle of the chainsaw. And of course, you can have him wielding it, as I did at the beginning of this review. I mean, with the arms designed as they are, you may not be able to get them over his head. But of course, if you wanted to put him in the Leatherface stance, that's probably something you can also pull off as well. Now, we're going to come back to this chainsaw near the end of this review. We'll just put it off to the side in the meantime. Getting, though, a closer look at Leatherface. One thing I did say, though, at the beginning when we were doing the comparisons, is that this guy is considerably heavy. And I was expecting this guy to be lighter than what he actually is. And there's a reason for that, and a decision that Trick or Treat Studios has done, probably not just for Part 2, but moving forward with the other Leatherfaces as well. Before talking more about that, let's look at the head sculpt here. The Savini head sculpt mask that we get here is actually one of my favorite things about Part 2's Leatherface. Yes, it doesn't have, I mean, obviously, if you look at the original 74 film, it basically just looks like more paper, the way they've sewn together the mask. This time around, Savini opted to go with more of character, like more personality to the actual mask. So not only, obviously, does he have the sewn together patches of skin, but if you look real closely at it, and you don't even have to look that closely at all, if you look to the side, for example, you can actually see part of a person's face. His eye, his nose, and what looks to be the remains of a goatee that ends up being the side of the beard for Leatherface. It's such a cool looking touch, and that would have been on the original movie mask as well. It's slightly darker color as well to the rest of the mask around it, so it really helps to make that stand out. Things that also stand out that you can get a chance now to see more on the 6-scale figure is there's some eyes, there's some noses, a couple of ears there off to the side as well. I don't know why he would have chosen those parts of the mask to sew together. And I'm not just talking about Savini when he designed the mask, but I'm thinking like Leatherface. Why would Leatherface choose things like ears and stuff down below? unless there's some reasoning why he wanted to choose specific facial features as opposed to patches of skin. Either way, though, it's a really elaborate looking mask, nicely recreated here from Trick or Treat Studios. Of course, you got the slightly recessed sockets of his eyes now revealing his eyes underneath, and of course his mangly looking teeth exposed there as well. It's a really interesting looking mask. It's a tad on the shinier side compared to the way it actually looks in the movie, but couldn't be any bit happier with the way that the mask turned out. The actual hair here, he has a lot more hair on the top of his head than perhaps the 74 film. It's a really nice looking recreation, though, of the actual mask that he has. And you know, one thing I was really expecting, too, is maybe a little more limitations. But when we get down to talking more about the articulation on the figure, you'll see there's just as much here for some of the other 6-scale figures we've also gotten from Trick or Treat as well. We'll talk, obviously, more about that in a moment. As for the rest of the figure, now, here's where all the weight is actually here. Now, this section right here, for most times that we've gotten 6-scale of Leatherface, tend to have additional padding. What they basically do is they take a 6-scale stock body and then they just add the additional padding to make the figure a little more overweight. Why he's already open like this is the actual shirt is attached by Velcro. And if I open this up just a little bit, as I've already done before, you can actually see that Trick or Treat has actually sculpted a fully sculpted body, like down to an oversized belly that it has down below. This is the thing that really adds to the weight of the figure, because they're not just using padding, they're realizing a fully developed body underneath. Likely they're probably going to be using for future figure releases, perhaps even for the Part 3 and the remake Leatherface. You'll have to stick around to find out. But this is basically just attached by Velcro, and you just close the Velcro back up. Unfortunately, though, I will have to, the times that I untucked this, I'm going to have to tuck it back into his pants. Nice little touches that he also has is on the sides. He's got the suspenders like he would have had in the movie. Nice little silver snaps there on the front of his shirt. And of course, the busy looking tie that he has in the movie as well. Leatherface is always known for having interesting looking ties. And the one from Part 2 is one of the more interesting ties that he actually has on his shirt. This is nicely done too. It's a wider tie than maybe like the Slaughter Mask 74 film, but it's a really cool looking tie that he has. All of this is really nicely done too. Both the tailoring on the shirt, the tailoring on the inside of the jacket. Like the inside of the jacket looks just honestly as good as it does on the outside. He's got a little handkerchief there tucked in there as well. The handkerchief does look like it is removable, so I want to make sure I don't want to untuck it completely. I want to make sure I keep it somewhat in there, somewhat intact. One thing that's also notable about the body is that they've gone with a more darker approach. Now, you could say that this is more so to the fact that they just want to make the figure a little bit more dirtier. I'm not sure really why they opted to go with a dark coloring like this. I mean, from the sense of having the sleeves rolling up at any given point, if you roll up the sleeves, actually, if I can try to get the jacket rolled up, it seems to be the case that they actually have put in sleeves for the shirt. You can see it right there. It's just a little bit harder, obviously, to take everything off for the jacket. But it's a really nice looking Leatherface. One of the other problems I have with this figure, other than the fact that the shirt is getting tucked here, I have to tuck that back in a little bit later, is that he also has the cowboy boots, like he would have had also in the film. The thing about the cowboy boots, though, is that this is a hard plastic. I mean, they have allotted no soft tolerances at all for the actual material that they've used. This is a hard plastic. So it will mean, unfortunately, when it comes to the articulation of the figure that we'll talk more about in a moment, there really isn't much that you can do with his boots, in the sense that you can't really angle his feet up and down. Now, because he also has a slight curve to the front of his boot there as well, you really do want to make sure, like, unless you get this guy with a display stand, now he doesn't actually come included with one, but unless you get yourself a 6-scale stand to stand this guy, I don't know if I would just out the gate, out of the box, really put this guy on display in any other pose really than having him standing straight. Simply just because, again, like, there's no allowances, there's no tolerances at all for his ankle. Really, you can't move his ankle at all back and forth. So, again, like, if you're putting this guy down, you really want to make sure his legs are kind of straight, because he does have a little bit of a balancing issue, more just by the way they've sculpted the front of his feet. Now, for the figure's articulation, going back and looking at his head sculpt once again, which again, like any opportunity to show you guys what this head sculpt looks like, the head itself sits to be on a ball joint, so it looks down about that far. It looks up, and you can also move it back and forth as well. Technically, too, the head would be able to rotate all the way around, although you're obviously going to be hitting collar by that point. As for the arms themselves, the arms easily come out at 90 degrees. You can bring the arms forward and bring the arms back. By the way, also there seems to be some additional padding that they put to the top of the vest or top of the suit jacket. But there seems to be like just a larger mass on this guy's body. I would love to see what they're going to do with this body moving forward, because you can't imagine that they're just doing this only solely for Part 2. I already suspect that they're probably going to be doing this as well for Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and also as well the remake that we'll be looking at. But this guy was notably heavy. I mean, right away, again, this guy in the back box, I could believe that they decided to actually sculpt the body. Really impressive, because I would have just suspected, I mean, not that Trick or Treat Studios would have done that, but that they would have just used the 6-scale body that they've already done already with the Michael Myers, and then probably just added the padding. didn't do that at all. Now, for the articulation, though, that's the only thing that's going to be a little bit more limited here. Yeah, sure, his arms come out forward and back. He does have, the swivel, a little bit of a swivel there in his bicep, single hinge only in his elbow, and hands do rotate all the way around. Where the limitation comes is because now they've retooled a brand new body here. He doesn't have as much articulation here for the torso. There's nothing here cut for the top underneath his pecs. There's nothing here that you can really rotate. I mean, yes, there is a bit of a ball joint here. I'm guessing really more where it's attached to the waist, but there's not as much that you can really do with the top of his torso as he's opening up his shirt like this. Now the legs do split. I couldn't help but notice that they are squeaky though. They seem to be also using ratcheted joints. And I'm wondering if they also incorporate ratcheted joints now because, again, there's so much additional weight and volume with his torso. That wasn't going to be the case before. But there's definitely notable ratcheted joints here on his legs. Again, they split out. There's a little bit of a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Once again, it seems to be only a single hinge on the knee. But the actual joints themselves, they're kind of hard to really describe. They're cut right here, and they feel as if they're almost like action figure legs in the sense that there's not a notable hinge where, like, you can see, like, if you ever hinge a figure's leg, for example, you can actually feel, oh, there's a double hinge right there. There's a hinge right there and a hinge right there. It was just really tight before. So he's got a double hinge on the knee. That's a nice thing to see. But again, like when you get into the ankle, like that's as far back and forth that you really can get with his boots. Sometimes, though, when you do try to move his feet back and forth, it ends up ultimately just popping off the cowboy boot. So you just have to pop it back in place. Again, he's a little bit limited there. I kind of wish in a way that they could have used a slightly softer plastic for his boots, just so that there could be a little bit more mileage. But I mean, when you actually look at the boot itself, you know what? Let's just take the cowboy boot off here. I want to show you the inside of it. So essentially what it is you got the ball joint here. The ball joint is only really going to be working at the top of the ankle. But again, because they're also using the harder plastic for the boot, it just means that the ankle isn't going to be having as much tolerance as, say, perhaps the 6-scale Michael Myers figures that we've looked at from them as well. All in all, though, it's a nice looking figure. Really happy also as well, because if you've already been collecting from other companies, of course, the other 6-scale figures for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean, in a way, Trick or Treat Studios has now carried on the torch for all the other Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. They were nice enough to provide not only the Leatherface from Part 3, also as well the remake, but backing up a bit, obviously I wanted to look at more Part 2 first, as obviously it's the first figure of the series of three movies, essentially, that they're going to be doing figures for. I hope, though, that's not the end. I'm still rallying, and I might be very well the only person that even has any remote interest in this, but I do hope at one point they do tackle the next generation for at least a basic version of Leatherface, but dare I hope that we might also get ourselves a drag Leatherface as well. I mean, again, I might be the only person that might be actually interested in a drag version of Leatherface, but I hope that's something they eventually approach when they get to that in line. Moving now over to the rotisserie. Leatherface wielding his chainsaw high in the sky. It's not something so successfully pulled off, mind you, especially if you got the figure rotating on a turntable like this. The problem isn't so much the ankle pivots, because the ball joints are there. The problem more is the fact that they accomplished the cowboy boots by using a harder plastic. I think one of the reasons probably why they did decide to use a harder plastic as opposed to something softer, keep in mind too, like he's got a lot of weight in his upper body. You want to make sure that you give him a nice stable footing, and maybe the harder plastic was the better route to go. If they had used softer plastic or even vinyl or faux leather, I mean, those last two things would be problems anyways, because they would eventually start to split and crack over time. Harder plastic, yes, can give a better stable footing for the figure, but it means, though, that if you're looking at him, especially with the way he's angled his feet, the feet are kind of more sitting on the sides than they are completely flat. What I might try to do, though, is not maybe submerge in hot water, because I don't want to damage the boots at all, but maybe even just taking a hairdryer and softening up the sections where his ankles would normally have been, and see if I can bend the boots inward, just enough, so that if he's standing like he is standing right now, his feet will appear more flat than sitting more bow-legged. What do you think of the figure, though? Let me know down below in the comments section. I mean, first of all, obviously, I did want to start things off with the Part 2 Leatherface before we jump over to Leatherface Part 3 and then, of course, the remake. I mean, it was a good place to start. And obviously, if you are already collecting other 6-scale companies' Leatherfaces, the fact that Trick or Treat Studios jumped on board with Part 2 was, I think, a really smart place to start things off. Whether they may go back, though, and do anything from the 74 film, I hope, because I would love to see, I mean, based on how much detail and how much work they put into this piece, I would love to really see what they'd be able to do with the 74 film. If it is, though, just a case that they're going to be taking from like Part 2 and moving it forward, we already know, again, we're getting Leatherface from Part 3. We're also getting as well the remake. All of those figures we will be looking at in upcoming reviews. But I hope also as well that we might get also future Leatherfaces. I jokingly said, of course, next generation. Does anybody have any interest at all in... I made this joke to Trick or Treat Studios as well. I might very well be the only person on this planet that actually wants a drag Leatherface 6-scale figure. They definitely need to make that happen. But I would definitely certainly be open to the idea of the new beginning. I mean, a new beginning for, of course, Leatherface also as well. I mean, we could get Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. Do your thing, cuz. There's lots of definitely opportunities. And again, basing it from what we have so far with Leatherface from Part 2, I definitely think, though, that Leatherface and the chainsaw are in proper hands. Again, if you guys are interested, get this one for yourself. Leatherface from Part 2, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. It's available right now over on their site for $199.99. Bare bones, yes, but you never know. We might see ourselves an appearance of Nubbins. Hey, there's always an opportunity as well for them to release some accessory packs, similar to what they've done with Michael Myers. But yes, this guy is available over on their site for $199.99. Thanks to the folks over at Texas. Thanks to the folks over at Trick or Treat Studios. They did provide, of course, the sample of Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. They did also provide samples of both the Part 3 and the remake. We will be looking at in upcoming reviews. And of course, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, want to see the remaining reviews for those other two Leatherfaces, yes, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.